So everybody needs to watch the press conference they had today in North Carolina. The district attorney gave a press conference about the Andrew Brown case. If you don't know, the Andrew Brown case was the drug dealer in North Carolina. They were serving a search warrant and they had him boxed in, and he tried to run over the police officers, so they shot him dead. Now, immediately after it happened, they didn't release the body cam footage. The family was allowed to see 20 seconds of it, and that's it. And so then the family's attorneys immediately afterwards, they had press conferences and everything, and they were saying he was executed and blah, blah, blah. He didn't pose any threat to the officers. He wasn't doing nothing but sitting in his car with his hands on the steering wheel. All this fucking shit that's not true. And then when they had the hearing, because what they were trying to do is to get the police to release the body cam footage. And at the hearing, the district attorney said, no, these people are lying. And the judge had seen the video, and the judge agreed him and wouldn't release it because they were doing an investigation. They have to investigate. Was it justified? How did it happen? Who shot what? Blah, 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 blah. For the uneducated, this shit takes time. Okay. So now at the press conference, say, well, what is the district attorney going to do? Tells them straight. I watched the video. I looked at it, analyzed it. I'm not charging the police officers because they did the right thing. And then he stood up to the fucking, because in the press asked the most stupidest questions. Could you have just let him go? How can you look at the video and say he wasn't trying to run over officers? Couldn't you have just shot warning shots? Blah, blah. The most stupidest fucking questions. You know? Like, are we missing the fact that this guy is a fucking drug dealer? They weren't there serving a warrant for somebody who evaded taxes or something. No, this guy is a freaking drug dealer. We should never wish the death onto other people. That's wrong. But I said this before. This guy's a parasite. This guy's poison to his own community. I mean, you would want this kind of guy off the streets. I'm not saying he should have been killed, but he kind of brought that on himself. You know, they were there serving a search warrant for a guy, not a search warrant, an arrest warrant for a guy that is a drug dealer. He sold drugs to an undercover cop. Oh, and by the way, where they caught him was a school zone. What if they had let him go, right? And then he went around the corner speeding away from the cops and then ran over a kid. Then what they would be saying, right? They'd be saying the exact opposite. They'd be saying, why didn't the cops stop him? Right? You should watch that press conference, because that fucking district attorney, he stood up there. Every single one of those reporters you could tell they were all just liberal pieces of shits, because every question was just the most stupidest fucking question. Why didn't you just let him go? Because we're serving a warrant for his arrest because he's a drug dealer? That's why we're not letting him go? Duh. And what's interesting about the press conference, it just goes to show you the collective stupidity of the press. It's not just stupidity. It's like they have totally bought into this woke culture, this critical race theory, this hatred for cop. They've totally bought into it because why? It's been their news cycle for the last 2 years already. Their news cycle is critical race theory, hating on Trump, hating on cops, abolishing the police, all these radical shit, and that's what it's been. So they're heroin junkies. They're addicted to this crap. And that district attorney, he stood up and he fucking told them to their face, hey, like, did you watch the same video I watched? Because the video I watched, this is what happened. You know? Like, why didn't you release it earlier? Because we don't want it to be tainted. We don't want the investigation to be tainted. Well, what are you referring to? And he didn't say it, but you know what he was referring to. He was referring to the George Floyd case. you know? And then he started to speak about how those attorneys lied because they had protests and everything. Now, granted, they weren't really violent protests because it's in a small town in North Carolina. And in, you know, it's North Carolina, which is traditionally a conservative state. You know, if this had been in Minneapolis or Seattle or fucking Oregon, yeah, there would have been violent protests, obviously. But is that where we're at? Where the rule of law doesn't apply anymore? Because it's really sad if it is. If that's where we're at, it's really sad. Really, really sad. Hey, those attorneys should be held accountable for what they did. They spread lies. They told straight out lies. And again, this guy was a fucking drug dealer. Nobody should give two flying fucks about him. That's just my opinion. But he's selling poison. He's destroying people's lives. How many people has he killed because of his drug dealing operations? Right? How many lives and families has he destroyed because of his drug dealing? I will never know that, right? Well, good for that district attorney standing up and saying the shit that everybody else is thinking in this country. Well, not everybody else, but a lot of people are thinking in this country. It's like, why are we even messing with this? Is madness. This is total fucking madness. And more and more people are waking up. More and more people are standing up. More and more media is starting to fucking call it out for what it is. Now, the mainstream media, unfortunately, they've put all their cards on the table. They have to run with this. Because if they come out and they start reversing themselves, then they will lose their audience forever. You know? And really, their audience is really boiling down to ignorant people and crazy fucking leftists. That's it. That's it. Anybody that was even moderate doesn't watch that anymore because they realize all the bullshit they're pushing. You know, they like to complain about dogma on the right, but like their dogma is now reached insane levels. Their dogma to the COVID thing, their dogma to anti-police rhetoric, their dogma to Trump is not even in office anymore. He hasn't been in office for over 3 months and they still talk about him. That man has no influence whatsoever. I mean, with his supporters, yes, but as far as politically, he has no influence whatsoever, and they still talk about it. Still mainlining that heroin. To the point where, I mean, even something as simple to understand as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, something that, in my opinion, that's simple to understand. They've turned it into something it's what it's totally not. You know? Hamas is firing rockets indiscriminately. They do not care where they hit, where they go. They're just firing rockets indiscriminately. And so the Israelis have every right to do what they need to do. Well, they've killed 200 Palestinians and only 10 Israelis. That's because the Israelis are good at fucking war and the Palestinians suck at it. You know, you want to be honest? That's the honest thing. Because these terrorists they're not good at it. Fucking retards. Alright, so back to the Andrew Brown thing. So of course, you know what's gonna happen. There's gonna be protests, there's gonna be riots all over the country. Right? Again, all these mindless lemmings supporting a drug dealer. You know, a drug dealer. Just how we've devolved as a society. We're breaking down heroes and people that deserve to be fucking put on a pedestal, and we're elevating drug dealers and wife beaters. You know, that's what we're elevating. They're putting these guys' names on posters. They're naming streets after these guys. NBA basketball players are wearing their names on their jerseys. This is where it's come to. And they're wondering why people are fighting the COVID thing. We're not supposed to talk about it, but why are people fighting it? Because it makes no sense whatsoever. It makes absolutely no sense. You know? Gleyber Torres, the shortstop for the Yankees, he just tested positive for coronavirus. Okay? He had already had the coronavirus earlier last year. He'd already had it. I think it was in spring training of last year he had it. Okay? And to put even more of a cherry on top of it, he had been vaccinated. So not only had he had the coronavirus before, so he should have had the antibodies, he'd also been vaccinated, and now he tests positive for coronavirus. Now, you tell me how that's supposed to instill confidence in people to take the vaccine. Okay? I know there's the science behind it, and we should trust the science, and blah, 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 blah. But I mean, if you had it, survived it, so you should have the antibodies for it, and then on top of that, you got vaccinated for it, right? That guy should be good. No, he's got it again. Well, I mean, where's the incentive? I don't see the incentive to take it. What's the difference? You know, what is the difference? If you can still get it, then why inject yourself with an experimental? Because it's not a vaccine. It's not a vaccine because it's experimental. It hasn't been proven. Now, obviously it hasn't, because look, I just gave you an example. That's one example enough for me. Well, everybody make their own decision on that, but hey, we all gotta live our own life, right? It's up to you how you want to live it. Do you want to live it with a boot on your fucking face or not? Well, what do you want?